This is Rav Aharon Color, section 2, number 2. While Rav Aharon's fundraising efforts, I don't think we would assume is the central aspect of who he was, but I think learning about how he fundraised and understanding a little bit what he went through and how much he was involved in this sheds great light on his personality, how dedicated he was, and it also gives us a little bit of a sense of the Hakaras Hatov, that the gratitude which we who knowingly or not benefit every single day in our lives from what he built in America and around the world, gives a sense of gratitude for that. Rav Aharon was always constantly fundraising, whether it was for the yeshiva, the fledgling yeshiva in Lakewood, for Chinuch Atzmai, Chinuch here in Eretz Yisrael, which he put a tremendous amount behind, for Hatzalah efforts, saving Jews during the Holocaust. He was a tremendous fundraiser. I don't mean that in a talented way. I don't know how much money he did or not, but the amount of time and efforts that he put into it, as we'll try to show in our little section here, we'll see. He, as far as I gathered, it seems that he lived in Borough Park, I believe, and he would travel to the yeshiva around Thursday, down to Lakewood on Thursdays, and be there over Shabbos and give shiurim there. And somewhere in the middle of the week, he went back to Borough Park, and that's when his fundraising efforts took place. Let's take a look from one of the books about Rav Aharon, how it describes what his days were like. One of the Yeshiva Bacharim recalls a typical day in New York with Rav Aharon. It was his turn to be Rav Aharon's driver. Rav Aharon left his apartment in Borough Park immediately after breakfast. Right after breakfast, he's right on the way. After breakfast, the entire day was spent without any let-up, traveling, meetings, the yeshiva office, visiting people to solicit funds. A day full of strains and its usual share of heartache. During the entire day, Rav Aharon ate how much? One apple. One apple in the car, holding the core of the peel and the pits in his hand until the next stop. The day continued beyond exhaustion. Finally returning home close to midnight, the moment Rav Aharon walked in, he stopped and he says, "Oh," he claimed, the look of pain on his face and the sound of anguish in his voice, like a man who had been starving for a month. "I have not yet learned today." The whole day was given to Klal Yisrael, a person who was kol kulo Torah, like we said last time. Despite that he had held the sefer in his hand throughout the day, glancing at every spare moment. He was trying, and that he had been talking and learning with the driver. And despite the fact he was constantly thinking and learning, but real learning he hadn't done, he immediately seized the Gemara and sat down to learn with extreme zeal. When the Rebbetzin brought in a bowl of soup, he refused it. "Give it to him," he said, pointing to the exhausted driver. He himself had no time to eat. Days of this sort were the rule rather than the exception. Let's see some specifics of what things were like. Rav Herschel Rosenbaum Shlita once had to show for the Rosh Yeshiva in New York. He stood inside the apartment near the door, waiting for the Rosh Yeshiva to take his coat and leave. The Rebbetzin came over, wrapped up a piece of sponge cake. You remember that sponge cake, everybody? Sponge cake? And put in the Rosh Yeshiva's coat pocket. She turned to Herschel and said, "Ulai v'ulai, maybe, just maybe he'll notice there's something bulky in his pocket. And just maybe he'll put his hand in his pocket and take it out. And just maybe he'll open up, and just maybe he'll eat it. Otherwise, he won't eat anything the whole day." I love that story, very quaint. And another one. This is, we'll continue with this next time a little bit, but not only the efforts, the bizyonos, the sufferings, and the lack of appreciation, and that great Gedolim went through. It's hard for us to imagine today. I hope it doesn't go on anymore. But in their fundraising efforts, what they had to go through and deal with. So Rav Aharon was in Cleveland. Of course, the Telz Yeshiva was establishing itself there. And one of his fundraisers said we should go to Cleveland. First, Rav Aharon made sure that his efforts wouldn't hurt the Telz Yeshiva. He didn't want to go at first, but then they told him it'll be fine. So he went. And at first, they waited a tremendously long time in the man's office, not calling him in. Hard to imagine, not calling the Gadol Ador. Okay, and then we're finally called in. And the Rosh Yeshiva explained the purpose of their visit and what they wanted to accomplish for American Jewry. They started talking about what Lakewood was, etc. The man literally launched into an angry tirade. He couldn't be stopped. "What are you accomplishing for the Jewish people? You're a bunch of benkvetchers." The man was furious, and he didn't stop insulting for a good 5 to 10 minutes. All the while, the Rosh Yeshiva sat there calmly. Then the man went on to praise the work of Shechter's Conservative Seminary. Rabbi Weisberg answered him calmly but poignantly, with the Rosh Yeshiva all the while signaling Rabbi Weisberg to remain calm and talk respectfully. And then they showed him out through a warehouse, and sent it to a secretary. The secretary didn't even offer the Yeshiva a chair, wrote a small check, and Rabbi Weisberg begged Rav Aharon, please rip up the check. This is not for us. And Rav Aharon said, I won't do it, because if I rip up the check, it would hurt the Telz Yeshiva. I don't want to affect them. I don't want to set them off. And that's what he did. And we're going to continue with that a little bit more next time, a little more sense of the bizyonis that he and other Gedolim went through. I think it's something important for us to know.